What up, man? We are back for another one, man. Mike D right here, Ron Babe on my side, man. We are doing To Pimp a Butterfly today, man. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, man. You know, I got the vinyl.
I didn't know you had that
Um,
on vinyl. Oh, wow.
yeah, yeah,
That's what's
man. It's my
up.
shit. It's my shit.
Listen, man, at first, I'm not even going to lie to you. Like, some of the records that we have been covering, well, we'll just go down the line, right? And for the people who haven't checked out the show before, we broke down the production of Akumenai, how important that is to that classic album. We broke down the production of Illmatic on the episode after that. And most recently, we've done College Dropout from Kanye West. Now, when it came to this project, it was a debate what we were going to do next, and it just made sense to do To Pimp a Butterfly. It's coming up on the 10-year anniversary. On top of that, we didn't even have any knowledge of that when we made that decision. But I was kind of scared because there wasn't as much research done for this project. I mean, sorry, not research. There wasn't enough, as much research out there, excuse me,
Right.
as the other projects have, because a lot of other projects are 20 plus years old. And I was like, man, on the research end, how deep are we going to be able to go? How in depth are we going to be able to go on this? And then listening to the project over and over, and finding the research that I found, I was like, oh yeah, there's a lot to talk about in this project, and I think we made a great choice here.
Yeah. Yeah. I was the only reason why I was a little I felt, away was I know it's not everyone's favorite Kendrick album.
Yeah,
It's my favorite Kendrick album. I think it's yours as well.
hands down.
Um, yeah. And so I was just that was the only thing I wasn't sure of. Like I'm aware of how people receive Kendrick and sort of the strikes that they hold against him. I feel like just as a piece that should be studied, as an album that should be studied, I think To Pimp a Butterfly is, it is leagues better than all of his albums for so many different reasons.
Me too. And you and I have known each other for decades now. We've known each other since high school, right?
Yeah.
So we've shared the same sentiment, since 2015 when this album dropped. And
Yeah.
and for the fact that this album doesn't get heralded in similar fashion as, the other projects, meaning, Good Kid, Mad City, and Damn, I think it makes it even more interesting to talk about this, because I don't want to approach this from a standpoint of, you as the listener aren't smart enough to get what we're getting. We're not coming from
Right.
a standpoint. We're not coming from the
Right.
standpoint of trying to sell you on something you don't like either. But I just think it's fascinating that an album that I heard the moment I heard it, like I said, and I said this on the show many a times. When I heard it for the first time, I was like, "This is the best hip hop album I've heard since Supreme Clientele." And
I
yeah,
texted you. You were the first person I texted, by the way.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mm.
and I still, I don't know if I still stand by that, but it wasn't a crazy notion digging into it, and we're gonna get into it when we talk about this album a little bit more. But I want to say all that to say there have been some who have who have elevated this album after the fact, but I think it's very interesting to note that we felt this way about this album the day it came out. And as high as the industry has always been on Kendrick, this album didn't get that level of adulation. Now, did it win
Mhm.
Grammys? Yes, it did. And did it go platinum eventually? Yes, it did. It did over 300,000 the first week. So it's one of those things where it's like it's hard to say that it didn't get appreciated, because it did get appreciated, but it is also viewed as the stepchild of Good Kid, Mad City in some fashion
Yeah.
too. I mean, what do you think about how it's placed?
Yeah, it's definitely that. I think that he I think Good Kid Mad City, excuse me. Good Kid Mad City was such a moment. Good Kid Mad City is a masterpiece in its own right. And I think that people expected Good Kid Mad City Part 2.
Yeah.
And not only did he not deliver that, but he went way left. shift. Like I was trying to also think about just what music was out at that time. And not only did he go way left of Good Kid, Mad City, but there wasn't anybody messing with jazz or funk at to this degree at that time. It was just so left field. I think that you were either with him or you wasn't, and a lot of people, I think wasn't with it.
It's very difficult for anyone, and we've seen this historically, to follow up the type of album that Good Kid, Mad City is. Because I would liken the type of album Good Kid, Mad City is to like a documentary, Get Rich or Die Trying, a Doggy
Mhm.
Style. These are like
Right.
these super forces where everybody is kind of all on one page. That like, yo, this is the classic. This is the best album of the year. All hands on deck, and it feels like when he went in for this second album, it wasn't like he was trying to follow it up, but you could actually hear remnants of what success does. It really showed the type of artist that he is for me. And
Right.
I liked Good Kid, Mad City, and I remember, you were higher on Good Kid, Mad City than I was when it dropped. Um, and eventually, I got on the train with it. It's a dope album. It has great moments. I might not be as high as most people are about it, but this one, I was like, yo, he's taking this somewhere else. And
Yeah.
production has a lot to do with it. And like I told you
Mhm.
offline, I feel like even though he might not have been at the mixing board actually with hands on because he had an incredible team for this, I feel like Kendrick, even as an artist and as a voice, is a producer on this album. He's
Absolutely.
utilizing his voice as an instrument. He's playing multiple characters here. And I know we wanted to start talking about this album from a theme standpoint,
Yeah.
and get that overarching theme, because the way this album reads, and I say it because it is a story, it's a book, it's a movie, and the way it reads, you have to understand the overarching theme and be ready to actually enter that theme and follow it from piece to
Right.
piece. Now, that might not play incredibly well in the streaming era, because by 2015, nobody's buying CDs. Vinyls really weren't back on the scene like that as well. About 2015, everybody's playing this through their devices, and when you have the
Right.
devices, more times than not, you have options to skip around, whether it be that particular album or just skip around in general. And that's not what this album's for. This album is to
Right.
listen to from beginning to end. So, do you want to speak to the overall theme of To Pimp a Butterfly and what you got from that? And I can kind of piggyback from there.
Yeah, and I guess it would be good to inform the viewers, just my background, just as far as
Yes,
the
yes.
work that I do. Like I do have a background in production and like beats and all of that, but the majority of my work now is in the theater world, is in musical theater world. I write and compose musicals and all of that, and so that was the thing that turned me on about this project, is that it completely put me in that world of, oh man, like this is a straight up musical. And I think it's good to start with the what was the original title of the album. The original title of the album was To Pimp a Caterpillar, and he ended up changing it to Pimp a Butterfly, but To Pimp a Caterpillar, um, spelled the acronym is Tupac. So to pimp a caterpillar. I think people knew that, but it's worth saying.
Yeah.
But the macro idea though being sort of this metaphor for society's exploitation of um, particularly black men, and the artistic talents and abilities of black men, and society's exploitation of that, and how it can sort of lead you down sort of this path of destruction. and and then to me, it's almost like he asked the question, because this is the thing too. This is the thing too. Typically, with an artist's second album, this is so like the first album is typically the album where they pour their heart and soul into it, and this is the album that sort of talks about their life up to where they are, and
Right after
then
the fame.
yeah, the second album a lot of times typically deals with the artist dealing with this newfound fame. And I
Hmm.
think Kendrick did definitely that. Like I think about Life After Death, perfect example. Um, and I think Kendrick did that, but it was almost like he asked himself, like, okay, how did Tupac handle this success? You know what I mean? Like, and I just thought that was just the poem, just to frame it around the poem is brilliant in itself. Um, but then that framing it that way, it forces you to one, it forces the listener to you have to listen to every moment. You
Yep.
can't you can't skip any you can't skip over any moments. Um, and it for that reason, also with this album, and we talked about this, that makes the track listing equally as important.
Yep.
This is an album where you can't just move certain songs around and think that it'll play the same way. Each song is positioned where it is for a certain reason, and I think that the that's sort of the macro. And I feel like when I listen to the album, I hear the album in three parts. I hear I hear a journey of self, the first part, and I feel like that's like Wesley's theory through For Sale.
Hmm.
Then he goes to the neighborhood, the journey of him coming back home. That's Mama through wait a minute, Hood Politics,
Hmm.
and then after that, now he's addressing the state of the nation. So it goes from self to neighborhood to the bigger idea, and that's from how much a dollar costs to I would say and then Mortal Man sort of kind of sums up everything what it's all about.
Hmm.
And crazy enough, if we're talking about the track listing, I found it interesting that we go from we go from Wesley's theory, which is this sort of like um, really bombastic, almost like cluttered, just like you listen to it, and you're like, what the fuck is this? It sounds like noise. You know what I mean? And like you go from that, and by the time we get to the end of the album, it's almost sort of this sparse, minimal sort of way about Mortal Man. And I think all of that is on purpose.
And you're right. And from a soundscape standpoint, he took us everywhere. And he took us everywhere musically. And like I said, in my personal opinion, obviously this is a hip hop album. But I listen to this album in the same way that I listen to a jazz album. There's a lot of
Right.
improv here, musically and flow wise. Even when you talk about songs like, For Free, For Sale, even institutionalized. It's a lot of jazzy freestyling, type of stuff going on. And like you said, if you here for your rap shit, you got hood politics here. And I think it's important to note that again, it's 2015. I told you this offline. I was like, I couldn't really put a year on this album, right? It doesn't sound like
Right.
anything that was going on at that time. The stuff that was out at that time was Compton by Dr. Dre. I remember the game dropped the documentary
You know,
2
yeah.
25. I can think of some of the
Mhm.
bigger singles of that year as well, but this sounds like none of that. And in my personal opinion, it's going to age and has aged incredibly well. It doesn't sound like it's 10 years old either. because of those elements. It used not just timeless themes and timeless elements, but many of the things that he's talking about that he was obviously going through then after following up Good Kid, Mad City. He's literally going through now 10 years later, almost to, two, three times over, And if you want to know how Kendrick Lamar feels about his fame or deals with having to balance this act between being critically acclaimed and commercially viable, this is the album to listen to.
Right. Right.
He goes through all of those things, and you can hear the fear and intensity and the vulnerability in all of these records, and just leading up to that point. And like you said, it's framed in a way where it's like, look, man, what we always talk about, man, what would Pac do? Well, he's talking to him, and he
Yeah.
framed the album, that album in this way. And it starts off with, like you said, Wesley's theory. And I was listening to Shaq talk, and he was talking about the passing of what was his name? He just passed, NBA great, NBA player who was huge in business. It'll come to me in a second. I didn't put this in my notes, unfortunately. You know who I'm talking about. It'll come to me in 1 second. Hold on. It was Junior Bridgman. So he was talking about Junior Bridgman.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so Junior Bridgman, for the people who don't know, rest in peace to him. He was an NBA player in the late 70s, early 80s. And once he retired, he was able to get in business, and very successful in business. And they say he had a net worth, up to like 1.6 billion. But he got into like the Wendy's and things of that nature. Anyway, Shaq was, talking about how close he was to him, and he was one of the people that he reached out to after he got in the league, because he heard the notion that 4 to 6 years after pro athletes retire, 75% of them are broke. Well, I think Wesley's theory is a play on that. Where in the entertainment world, and for hip hop artists, we always hear those stories about how hip hop artists either squander their money or didn't get paid what they thought they were getting paid. And you look at the number of record sales and this and that, and you're like, well, how did they end up here? Well, this is where he starts the album off. George Clinton's on here. Production choice, like you said, sounds like a bunch of noise, but he's everywhere with this, and he's even using Wesley Snipes as a metaphor. And again, you hear the fear from jump in this album.
Right.
I think that a large part, and maybe we're going to be talking about a lot of this part of it today, it's the palatability of this album, or lack thereof, for people. Because
Right.
when you look at Kendrick's one of those oddballs, if you will, in this game where you either get it or you don't. You have people who feel like he's properly rated, and as far as like where people place him and how high he is in the echelon of MCs overall and MCs in his class. And then you have the people who are hearing the same thing who feel like he's incredibly overrated. And
Right.
I think the palatability is the lock and key in there, in the whole issue with that palatability. Saying all that to say, I think when it comes to this album, it doesn't start off as strong as many of the other classic albums from a palatable sense, right?
Right.
That we're used to talking about. And by the time this album starts to heat up and starts cooking, most people are like, oh, well, this is mid. You know what I'm saying? And I think that if there is an Achilles heel of To Pimp a Butterfly, it is how it starts. But the start is with a purpose, right? And you have to understand the purpose to get the whole buy-in.
Right.
You think that Wesley's theory was the perfect way to start this album, or should he have went another direction?
It's not a traditional intro,
Yeah,
and I think that's what I love about it.
yeah,
I think just as a song, it's one of my favorite songs on this album.
okay,
And I think the thing that has been very consistent with Kendrick, as we've seen throughout his career, is how unapologetic he is in his approach, and he he sort of proves he sort of proves that he's gonna, or he says that he's gonna do whatever he wants to do, and
Right.
he does not care what anyone thinks. And so with Wesley's theory, it actually made me lean in. Like, it was one of those things where I literally said, "What the fuck am I listening to right now?" Like, I wasn't expecting it. It was, and it was like, "Oh, this is what we doing? This is what we do? Oh shit. Okay, wait. All right. You didn't tell me. I wasn't ready. All right.
Right.
Let me buckle up." And so I like that though. I like I like to be, and that's just me personally. I like to be challenged, and I like when people. I like to be surprised, especially with music,
Yeah.
pleasantly surprised. And so, as a song, the shit is funky. That electric bass, that Thundercat electric
The cat.
bass is crazy. um, the intro, the "Every Nigger's a Star" intro
Yep.
is so cryptic in a way, and something that he does throughout this album a lot, and he does on this song. Most of the songs have two parts. Like, it
Mm.
starts almost like what he does with Euphoria, where there's this intro, "Your superpowers are super," and then he gets to the meat of the song when the beat comes in. And I feel like that's a thing that's very Kendrick
Yeah.
esque, and something that he does. And so with this song, the you have the sample, and then I don't know, you feel like the song is gonna go one way just based off of the intro, and you're going down the depths of hell. It feels like you're going down, like you're in like fucking Dante's Inferno or something. Like, it's crazy.
It's and I like how you said that he likes to surprise his audience. We saw that with the Super Bowl performance, and everything that people see and say about Kendrick when it hits to a mainstream, um, you know, um, lens or a mainstream magnifying glass. I think about this album because, again, after coming off a Good Kid, Mad City, people expected you to try to follow this up, and I feel like with this album, I don't feel like he was concentrated on following this up. He was concentrating on making a great album and doing something extremely new and hitting you with some sounds that you wouldn't expect. Working with some people that you possibly wouldn't expect, and well thought out, man. Again, regardless of what people thought about the halftime show, and regardless of what people think about this album, you have to understand how well thought out these pieces are. And you have to appreciate that. We always talk about, what people aren't putting into the music. Like, dude put everything into this.
He did.
And the cast of people from Terrence Martin to, like you said, Thundercat, it was live musicianship.
Robert
Not a
Glasper.
Yeah, Robert Glasper's on. Like, this is intentional.
Yeah.
Live musicianship. We talked about, well, you spoke about this on our college dropout episode. You talked about the mixing nightmare that Never Let Me Down would be. What do you think
Yeah.
about this album from a mixing standpoint, and this song specifically from a mixing standpoint?
Man, and I might just be saying that just because I'm not an engineer. I know a lot of great engineers where this is just what they do. So they might have a different. They're like, no, it's not a nightmare, but I just but and I'm in awe of engineers for that reason. Like, I
Me
think
too.
I think what they do is incredibly underrated, and we don't appreciate what they do because the engineer can literally make or break your song. Like, a good a
Hmm.
good mix and a bad mix, it's night and day. And so I listen to Wesley's theory, and again, I hear a logistical nightmare, and I think that mostly it's because it's knowing, and this is where Kendrick being having the vision and being able to communicate that vision. What's important, you have to know, and he has to have a strong sense of what needs to be in the foreground and the forefront and what
Yep.
needs to go in the background.
Yeah.
You know, what sounds we really need to hear, you know, how, what should pop, what should not. And I think I like that he used George Clinton similarly to how Outkast used George
Hmm.
Clinton on synthesizer, um, where you know, like what I love about synthesizers, like you can, if you were to, I think if you were to solo uh, George Clinton's vocals, like you just hear him babbling, just saying
Yeah.
like a bunch of like digital good times and like all this stuff, and I feel like um, Kendrick sort of used him in the same way, sort of in his voice in that
Hmm.
way. Um, yeah, and it's just knowing what to bring out front. I would like to also mention that it was said that this was originally a Mac Miller song. This
Really?
beat, this
Mm.
beat belonged to Mac Miller
And this was produced
first.
by Flying Lotus and Thundercat.
Correct.
Okay.
And Soundwave.
Soundwave, of
But
course. Can't forget the sound.
it was said that yeah, it was said that Mac Miller had this beat first, which I cannot hear that.
I can't
I
either.
mean, yeah,
I don't take this for again, and this is the genius of it all. And like you said, this is the stuff that we love. For an album like this and the story that it's telling and the musical trip that it takes you on that, we're about to really delve into, I got to give credit to an artist who hears this beat and says, I want to open the album like this. You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? Like, it
yeah,
doesn't hit you with all of the predictable signals to say, I this is my intro. This is my first song. You know what I'm
right,
saying? And
right,
he was able to do this, tell his story, open up this album talking about the exploitation of artists and art. And it's almost foreshadowing of how this project is going to be received.
yeah,
And even his career, like it's pretty impressive stuff.
yeah,
But again, like you said, it's all intentional. So after that, it goes to for free, right? So you get
yeah,
exploited, and then he's having his spoken word jazz moment where he's talking about what ain't free about him. You know what I'm saying?
right,
Uh, to start off with an interlude and then have bars with that interlude, and it shows you again the intent lyrically where he's going, conceptually where he's going, and stylistically where this project's gonna go. I mean, it's a jazz record at this point. This is
yeah,
a freestyle horns, everything that we love about jazz records. When you're sitting around, either cleaning your house or working or whatever you do while you're listening to jazz, this is that. And for him to do that spoken word with the content and it's entertaining, but it's kind of it's one of the few times that we really hear, and we hear that on this project too, with Kendrick's really being witty, if you will.
yeah, yeah.
There's
And
a
I
lot of
think
personality on this project.
yeah, yeah. And I feel like it was important to place for free sonically at number two because we're setting the tone, right? We're also
Mhm.
establishing in the first couple of songs what to expect sonically. And so Wesley's theory gave us the funk. And we come here and it's, oh, this is straight up jazz, you know? And so that's basically what this album is rooted in. And I just think that's such a brilliant way to because he could have easily did like a jazz sample. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he could have easily sampled a jazz record like a Pete Rock, like a Q-Tip, and just threw some drums over it and do it in that way. But I think because and we hear it throughout the album is so unapologetic about its use of jazz in different ways you may as well smack them in the face with what it is, and and go from there. I thought it was super brilliant.
I mean, and if we talk about storytelling again, and this is part of production, even, and I may reference his halftime show a few times in this episode because, again, this is what Kendrick does well. And I feel like this is kind of the start of him really showing that on a massive level. He's putting these building blocks together. This first song is about artists being exploited, and here
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about the exploitation of capitalism, black workers and things of that nature. And then boom, now you're going to King Kunta, and it's like you see what's building up here, where this thing is going. All of these songs are going together. They're woven within themselves, and it's I think that it's very interesting that he chooses to do these things during the time period where music, individual songs kind of live on their own. You know what I mean? Like projects
Right.
don't. I mean, we have people who put out full projects, but the way that they're distributed is individually, if you will. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not like you're buying an album and then you get it in one package and you're kind of forced to. I won't say forced to listen to the whole thing, but you want to listen to the whole thing because you want to know what you bought.
Right.
Whereas now, like if somebody comes out with a project, you're clicking a couple of seconds and you want to see which songs really, hit you. And more times than not, the song that is quote unquote a single is the one that has the most streams. It's you never really get a situation where organically there's a song that just catches that's not getting pushed now. You know what I'm saying? And it makes me
Right.
wonder how a song like You Don't Know would fare in the streaming era, when
Right.
it got no support from, the Blueprint as a single, you know what I mean? But,
Yeah. Yeah.
sidebar. Um,
Yeah.
but he's doing that in this era, and I think that is a testament to his attention to detail, and he understands what he has over his current peers. And that's, mainstream, underground, whatever. Like nobody puts together an album like this guy. It just is.
Mm-mm.
Um,
Mm-mm.
King Kunta is the next song, and it was, I guess it was the lead single. We're gonna get to I in a second. I feel like I was put out. It was put out technically first. Can't deny that. But I think because of the lukewarm response, it kind of got pulled back a little bit, and King Kunta was the one that was pushed to the forefront. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, I wasn't a big fan of King Kunta, and
Neither
still
was I.
am not huge on it. I feel like sonically and approach wise, I mean, I get it. I mean, I think they did what they could with that record to try to fit it in what's going on here. And I do think it fits in here, but I feel like this is the one time on this album where he tried to make a song for radio. And it's not bad. It just isn't as great as everything that's around it. But conceptually, again, and if we're talking about the undertones and sticking with the theme, it flows perfectly.
Yeah. I wasn't the biggest fan of this song either.
Yeah.
But it was one of those that I couldn't stop singing on my own. You know what I mean? Like for whatever reason, I'm just the power of the yam. What's the yam? The yam is the power of that. Like for whatever
Yeah.
reason, I was bopping to it, and I think what I do, what I love the song now, and I think what I really love about it is the way he builds the song builds, and it sort of goes somewhere. There's even a whole key change in it that sort of takes it up another level. And was this the one? Let me ask you, because
Yes.
he was going at Drake. Is this the
Right.
is this the song that kind of started that?
I think so. I think that
No, because
I feel like the the response to Control when he got on the BET cipher and said that about
yeah,
sensitive rapper jumping out in pajama clothes. I think that kind of started
yeah,
something. But if we're talking about on wax, yeah,
right,
this is directly after those. reference tracks were being found from Drake and the whole Meek Mill situation. And
Right.
he said that, the ghostwriter line and y'all sharing pins like, man in two man cell, whatever.
Man
Yeah.
said,
Yeah, and so it will always be etched in history for that alone. And I find it very interesting that he chose his first, I guess, major single, if you will, to actually say that line and make it known that, yeah, we don't do that ghostwriting thing around here.
right.
Um, but again, I do feel like this album is him separating himself from his peers. And I think
Mhm.
that line has a lot to do with that too. I remember when I heard this album for the first time, and there was no J Rock on it, there was no Ab Soul on it, no Schoolboy on it, and I'm like, I mean, and no, not in a combative way, but I'm like, yeah, he's separating himself from the rest, and there's nobody in his class that I feel like could have put this album together or anything close to it. But again,
Absolutely.
mind you, I don't think he's made anything close to this either. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like, I think Good Kid, Mad City is what it is. You know what I mean? It's etched in history in that way. But if I didn't know anything from anything, and you had both albums next to me, and I'm breaking both down, like this album is drastically better. I would rate this album higher than any album in its era, and
Yeah.
that I think that even includes My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy.
Yeah.
I just got to be
I
honest about it.
Yeah, no, I revisit this album more than I do Twisted Fantasy, and I love Twisted Fantasy, but I I feel like Twisted Fantasy. I feel like Aquemini crawled so Twisted Fantasy could walk, so that this album could run or
Yeah,
fly. If you want to
yeah,
look at it.
for sure. It's definitely an elevation of it, and I'm sure those albums were big inspirations on this album. One of the things that it was either Thundercat or Terrence Martin said that we're really delving into funk. Actually, it could
Yeah,
have been Engineer, but funk had funk had been done and jazz had been done. But I'm trying to think of when they were actually fused together and woven together in this way, right? Because when
right.
they start talking about funk being done, they were talking about Doggy Style, Chronic.
Of
Um,
course.
yeah, and then when you think about jazz being done, you think about the low end theory, you think about Dickable Planets, Pete Rock, CL Smooth, but
Right.
it was like either or, right? I think Outkast, and that's probably why it gets so many Aquemini comparisons, is because Aquemini delved in funk and jazz, but I felt like Aquemini and the Dungeon Family in general were more funk driven than they were
Yeah.
jazz driven.
Yeah.
This does both, and it does both on a high level. I feel like this is slightly more. If I had to give one more than the other, I'm gonna say 70% jazz, 30% funk, maybe.
Sure. For sure.
Because the jazz is very, very in your face with it, but the intentions are very funky. And
Yeah.
King Kunta is one of those situations where you really hear the funk influence and almost James Brown influence in
Yeah, man.
this album. And you got to do that when you're from the West Coast, man, because people are so familiar with funk. I mean, I don't fault them going funky on their first single at all.
My theory behind my theory behind him going this direction. Offline, we were talking about why jazz, and for me, like I'm always thinking about like the story and how the music sort of informs us of the why. So like I think about so like for example, I think about again, I coming from the musical world. Let's just say like Lion King. We all know the show Lion King takes place in Africa. It would sound crazy if the Lion King's music sounded like 80s punk, right? Like there's a reason why the show sounds the way it sounds. And to me, I look at To Pimp a Butterfly in the same way. and I'm asking myself, like, why jazz, why funk? And one of the things that we spoke on offline that I think makes so much sense is that it's this Im- this imperfect this imperfect art form that allows you, that's messy, that allows you to improvise, and you just kind of got to go with it despite what's happening.
Yep.
I also think that like hip hop, jazz is this insanely complex art form that wasn't accepted or appreciated by America until much later, only to be exploited, commercialized, and pimped until there was no soul left.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's a big thing. And as far as the funk goes, my theory behind the funk is typically with the second album, um, typically when you start to get money, let's put it that way. Typically when you start to get money and you get the fame, motherfuckers tell you, "Oh, okay, you Hollywood now. You don't win Hollywood."
Yeah.
And to me, I think Kendrick went Hollywood, but he went West Coast with it. You know what I mean? He went West Coast with it, and you got that '90s, that nod to the '90s funk, um, with this, with the fusion of this jazz, and to me, it's just brilliant.
Institutionalized really kind of caps off this whole opening, right? This whole
Mm-hmm.
opening of um, not just artists being oppressed, but black men specifically being oppressed, like on all levels, right? So this kind of caps off that systemic oppression artistically. I do think the institutionalized, it's one of those again that might not be as palatable, for people's ear. And I feel
Yeah,
like this is the record at the beginning of the album, production wise, where people will be like, "What's going on? Next track."
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? And then you get
yeah,
Snoop in there and Bilal in there that kind of breaks up some of that. But
yeah.
this talks about after that continued success. And so, who else to talk to you about success than having Snoop on the record, right?
Mm, yeah.
It makes
And
sense.
yeah, it makes sense on so many levels. I think it's smart for the reason you said. You put someone as recognizable, commercially recognizable as Snoop, on this really sort of weird kind of song. I think it's a brilliant move. I love that one of the things that he chooses to talk, that Kendrick chooses to talk about in this newfound success, is bringing on what happens when you bring the homies along. And these dudes, all they think about is robbing celebrities. You know what I mean? And it's
Mhm.
like and it sort of, to me, I think about the line from Wesley's Theory that he took from, I think it's we should never
Yeah,
give. What's
the
that?
the Dave Chappelle
What's
should have never gave these niggas money. The
Is it? Yeah, is that Dave
yeah, Dave
Chappelle?
Chappelle,
Yeah, yeah,
Robert
yeah.
James,
Should
yeah,
have never
yeah,
gave you
yeah.
niggas money. But yeah, I just thought that was a great sort of callback to that. This is another song that's in two parts.
These
Um,
songs all work together. Like they all
yeah,
string together.
yeah,
It's a play, and people like Snoop and Bilal are playing different characters in this play. Kendrick
yeah,
is playing about three different characters on in this album as well. We hear about Lucy a lot, like you know what I'm saying.
yeah,
Lucy is like this fictitious. I would say Leo Cohen, if you will. I'm not saying it's Leo Cohen, but I'm just saying how, just so the listeners and the viewers can understand, how he's putting a face on this. Listen, I ain't got no problem with Leo. Leo does his job. Leo actually is one of the few people who kept it real. He said, I got a family to feed. I can only respect
yeah,
that shit. But
yeah.
but he talks about this character over and over, like even on For Sale, which we'll get to later
Hmm.
on in the album. He's like, basically, we didn't got you groomed all the way up to get to this point so you can sign. And we hear about this Lucy character from beginning all the way
Yep.
through, like all of these
Yep.
parts work together. And I'm trying to think any hip hop album in general, or even in recent memory, that works in this way.
Yeah. Like there are albums that I think of, but I just don't know if they're done this. And it's gonna sound bad, and it's not a shot. And I don't even want to say the albums because it's gonna sound like I'm putting the albums down. But there are. It's just not done like this.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
there's a particular album that comes to mind, and I think it was like the late '90s. It's like the late '90s, early 2000s, maybe.
I think I know what you're
But
talking
and
about.
it was written as a like a script. You
Yeah. I
know,
know what
he
you're talking
had
about.
that.
That's my
He had
man.
that. He like me too, man. Me
Yeah.
too. Like he's
But at
he's
that
one.
time, I had never heard anything like it. And the video was
Yeah,
incredible, and it kind of like, yeah, okay. I don't want to
yeah, yeah, yeah. But these are dangerous people that we're talking about too. So I don't want to say nothing that
say.
anybody saw me on the street. But all that to say, um, I just think that Kendrick does this at a very high level. He has a
Yeah.
very uh, he has an understanding that's on another level to be able to pull this off.
His artistry is on a whole nother level, and it's on full display on this album. And for me,
Yeah,
this next song, production wise, I remember These Walls is what I'm talking about. I
yeah,
remember Kendrick doing an interview around the time this album came out, and he was saying this was his favorite song. This was actually my favorite song on the album at that time as well. And I remember when Damn came out, it was 2017. This is when I was listening to Abstract Radio really heavy. Well, it doesn't come on anymore, but yeah, it was in the middle of its prime, if you will. And one of the DJs played These Walls, and this is around like when Damn was out. And I was like, yeah, this album's a whole nother level. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you're
mm-hmm,
able to hear sonically, and again, production has a lot to do with this. The
mm-hmm.
mixing, engineering, and everything on this album, top notch, man. The clarity of how this song comes together and just the concept, too. I mean, I remember Kendrick saying he always wanted to make a song like this, but just, I hadn't had the opportunity to or whatnot. Very, I don't want to say neo soul, but very soulful. It's one of the few songs of its kind like this in his catalog. When you look at the success of a record like Luther right now, with it being number one, and knowing that 10 years ago, people didn't really understand this record, it's kind of sad. But, again,
Yeah,
that's the thing when you're a great artist or great at whatever craft that you're great in, you could do some things that are incredible that people won't get until you do something that might not be as incredible 5 to 10 years later. I mean, and that's just what it is. And as an artist, you have to be okay with that. I'm sure,
yeah.
as a fan, it kills me that Janelle Monáe gets nominated for Album of the Year at the Grammys for stuff that's nowhere near Arc
The
Android
first album,
and
yeah,
Electric Lady. It really does. But I mean, but again, people hadn't caught up yet, and that's fine. But These
yeah.
Walls is one of those
That's
moments.
a, that's another album too that's set up like a
It is.
theatrical. Yeah,
Arc
yeah.
Android's insane.
Art and yeah,
Insane.
the transitions on that album. Woo!
Insane.
That's another episode. That's another episode, bro.
It is
That
another
album is
episode, really.
crazy.
Yeah, I know,
That
man. I
album is
know we're
crazy.
really delving into hip hop albums, but the production on Arc Android, man. Again, another project that didn't have a lot of samples, just a lot of really smart, talented artists and musicians involved in the creation of it. It was beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh
beautiful.
man.
one of the best albums to ever
Um,
be recorded in this city. Yeah, I said it.
absolutely, absolutely.
But yes,
The
these walls.
um, the musicianship on this album is top notch, and I know we spoke on that, but like this song is an example of that, where you got Thundercat on the bass, you got Robert Glasper on the keys, you got
Mm.
Terrence Martin on the alto sax. Like it just
What?
doesn't get any better. That, and I think Bilal is
Yeah.
on background vocals. You know what I mean? Like it just
Anna
doesn't
Wise
get.
too, I believe.
Anna Wise,
Yeah.
yeah. Like he really pulled out he pulled out all the stops for this song. And I would also like to say, in the theme of Tupac, this is his "That's Why I Fucked Your Bitch" moment, where this is also a diss song. And he reveals it at the end of the song, if we're talking about the narrative and the poem. He says at this point, I think, I remember you doing something, misusing your influence.
Hmm.
And he goes into this song because he's talking about messing around with an enemy's woman.
Baby mama. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, baby mama. And, so that last verse, he's saying, while I'm in these walls, you're in those literal walls, you know, and there's
If these
nothing you can
walls
do.
could talk. Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
Crazy.
and it's dark, but it's also what it is. And if we're just talking about a story here, if we're just keeping about the narrative, like, man, that's crazy. It's crazy.
Crazy. I mean, I honestly, we want to talk about musically, conceptually, and just the way it's able to fit in here. And like you said, it starts the whole misusing your influence, part of the poem, so
Mm-hmm.
brilliant because he doesn't even start that at the beginning. At the beginning, boom, exploitation, we're on, these are the breaks, if you will, for lack of a better
Right.
term. Honestly, these walls is what kind of starts the album when it comes to this concept of misusing your influence, screaming in the hotel room. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, I think it's just one of his strongest songs, period. When you think about all of the things that it does, and it's a single. I mean, it had a video. I feel like, again, I understand why, with the climate at the time, that it wasn't the first single, but shit, if you're gonna make a bold move, make a bold move. I wouldn't have been mad if it was the first single, but I get it.
Yeah.
It's too smooth for the type of MC that he is, and the type of expectations that there are for following up Good Kid, Mad City. So at the end of the day, though, yeah, I think These Walls is one of the strongest Kendrick Lamar songs, and definitely one of the strongest on this album. But it does so many things. Could go on and
I'm
on
look,
about it.
I'm looking up right now. I want to find this poem because I feel like we may have to reference it.
Yeah, we're gonna have to reference it. Yeah, pull
Yeah.
that.
So I
Um,
remember I
oh,
remember you was conflicted, misusing your influence. That's where it starts.
yep, I
Yeah.
remember you was conflicted, misusing your influence, and then it has
Wow.
the moaning and all of that, and then it goes right into this, man. Shit's
Oh my
phenomenal.
god.
This, I
That's
mean, really, the album
crazy.
could have started here. It really could. It really could have,
Oh, that's
man. That would have
crazy.
really thrown people off. Like, the
Yeah.
album would have started here, really would have threw people off. Now, You was one of those records that I wasn't a huge fan of when it came out because I didn't totally
Right.
understand where he was going. But again, if you understand the whole piece and the different pieces of the puzzle, you get where You fits in, and You is extremely important to this
Yeah.
album. I feel like it's kind of his Eminem Kim moment, but he's talking about himself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, the conflicting nature of what we just experienced on These Walls. It's like loving you is complicated. It's like, yeah, I am a righteous man, but I'm also petty too. And we seen
Mhm.
that in this battle. I mean, it he talks about basically being a hypocrite in many ways, and
Yeah.
we hear that a lot on this album as well. That's why it is interesting that Tupac is kind of the framework for this album, because many people always called Tupac back in those days a hypocrite for having positive songs and songs that also articulated his anger. And
Yeah.
Kendrick is the same guy, but he articulates it in more of a less confrontational way many times.
Mhm.
He can get
Yeah.
confrontational too, but
Yeah.
you is that fight with himself,
Yeah.
and that battle within, and he's not only able to just articulate that through lyrics, he's articulating that through his vocal inflections, and those are some of the things when it comes to Kendrick. I think that because of his rap voice, you know, if it's piercing to you in that way, you're not going to listen to it, regardless of what he's saying.
It's a tough listen.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not only is he rapping, at least the second half of the song, not only is he rapping in his drunk voice, but he also touches on just the subject matter that he touches on. Like he's drunk and talking about suicide as well, which is a big issue in with black men that we don't talk enough about. And I think there are people out there who don't want to hear that for whatever reason. There's nothing
Mm-hmm.
wrong with that. Like maybe it's triggering. It could be triggering in a way that they don't want to experience or re-experience or anything. So I definitely, this is one of those songs where it's necessary for the
Mm-hmm.
story.
It
It's
is. It
so
is.
very necessary, and I'm glad it and I'm glad he kept it. I don't know. I mean, not to say that it would have been cut, but I could easily see someone in the studio being like, "Nah, bro,
Yeah.
like
And
like
I'm
we
glad
don't."
you said that though too. Like even with some of the songs that are imperfect on this album, they have to, like, you can't cut them. They tell the story, and that's what makes this album so different than many of the other ones, because like we said, the first four records, they are an act within themselves, right? And the transition doesn't work if institutionalized is removed and we go from King Kunta to These Walls. You need a beginning, middle, and end.
Right, right, yeah, yeah. I can't say enough about this, and this is one. Oh,
Hmm.
Kamasi Washington is on this record.
Okay.
Man, he has so many top-notch musicians on his.
It's
I don't know how
crazy.
like I'm a fan, and I think I became a fan of him off of this album. But just all the musicians that he has on here, just and man, it's crazy. Like Bilal is on the background vocals, SZA's on this track doing background vocals.
Mm.
Like it's just crazy. It's
On you?
crazy on you.
I didn't even know
There's
that.
Well, and that's something that I wanted to touch on earlier. Something that he does. Um, the idea of using your voice as an instrument and using the voice as an instrument. And not only does Kendrick do that with his own voice, he also incorporates other voices, not necessarily for the purpose of being in the forefront, but more so being in the background and providing texture and providing in contributing to just the overall just vibe of it. There's another song that comes later where it's brilliant, but this is an example of that where it's almost like underscore. It's almost like movie underscoring where they say that if you're watching the movie and you notice the underscoring, it's not good underscoring because
Hmm.
it's the underscoring is just there to support what's going on, and it's almost like it's not. It should be like it's not even there, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
It's
And
invisible, but if it wasn't there, you would miss it.
right.
Yeah.
And that's how he uses, that's how Kendrick uses voices on this album, where, like you said, he was like, wait, SZA's on this? Just
Yeah.
doing background vocals. You know what I'm saying? And,
Mm.
you know, Bilal was on this song, just doing background vocals. And just oohs and ahs and little riffs here and there. And, you know, you don't necessarily notice it because what's in the forefront is drunken Kendrick rapping. And, you know, that's where our ear goes. But listen to it when I ask folks to listen to it again and listen to the music underneath and listen to what's going on underneath it as well. And it's this is actually one of my favorite beats on the
Really?
album. It's a hard beat,
Yeah.
but I think it just throws people off because the way that Kendrick is rapping on it.
A lot of
Honestly,
jazziness there too. Um, you know, it goes into all right, and I don't know if the self reflection and then saying, okay, well, I'm gonna make a statement or an anthem. Well, let me rewind because I want to be real about this. All Right didn't really become an anthem until a few years after the release of this. And this song got bigger with time because of the timeless nature of the content and the timeless nature of the sentiment. You know what I'm saying? And when it was time to use a record, for protesting purposes and for social injustice, this one was already out there in the lexicon and got more legs because of it. And kind of a
yeah,
what's going on type of thing. And I'm not trying to speak to how big what's going on was in 1972. I wasn't there for that, but um, I'm sure that its emphasis grew over time. But with this one, this was what, the third, fourth single. It wasn't even
yeah,
really a focus on this album. I do remember a lot went into that video.
yeah,
The video was a big production, and he even had some original bars and stuff in the intro of the video, and that was a big deal. He was in the car with the whole, what I'm saying, black hippie gang, whatever. And this song just became, I think, one of his most important songs, period. And I want to say, I didn't, in my research, I didn't find it. I didn't find how Pharrell found his way on this album. But what I did find was Pharrell was heard King Kunta and I guess sent him this beat, right? And it was their idea, Kendrick, his team, or the mixing team, or whatever, to say, yo, we wanted Terrence Martin, saxophone player, to do some things on it. And it's like Terrence Martin said he got on it and start playing some stuff that, he thought they wanted to hear. And they was like, nah, man, just do whatever you feel type of thing. And like you said about underscoring, that's what that saxophone solo, or not solo, but that saxophone element in this track is. Like, if you're not really listening for it, you don't really hear it in that way. But I couldn't hear the song without that. And this song
mm,
needs that. And for it to be on this album, it needs that. And they
yeah,
did Pharrell a solid here because
yeah,
not only did they make it fit within the scheme of the album, and again, the hook is the hook. It says it all. Kendrick's spitting on here. He's tying everything together. This is kind of the song that brings the self reflection together with Lucy and the whole battle between evil and fame
right.
and social unrest. He brings all of those things together on this record, and this record is just, it's perfect, man. Again, These Walls is one of his best songs, but if we're talking about commercial success and we're talking about what it means to this era and this generation, I would nominate All Right to be a top 50 hip hop song all time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it sticks with the theme. A lot of times, in at least in musicals, there's musical motifs, which are sort of these musical moments that are repeated. It can either be like a melody line that an instrument plays, or
Yep.
something sung that someone
Right.
sings. And he does that here, where he brings it back to loving me is complicated. Da 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 da
He
da da
does.
da.
He also
Yeah,
does, what you want, you a house, you a car, 40 acres and a mule, a piano, a guitar, anything. See, my name is Lucy. I'm your dog. Motherfucker, you can live at
you
the
can
mall.
live.
And that takes us back to, Wesley's thing.
Yep, yep.
And I mean, it's again, man. It pisses me off, and again, I don't want to seem like a hip hop snob or a musical snob, or it's like you don't get it. But it's like I hate when records like this who do so many things just get
Yeah,
disregarded. Like,
yeah, yeah.
it
You know,
disappointed me when Kendrick got on Big Boy's show and they asked him to rank his album. This is when Damn was out. And he had this one third. Now, I get it. He was promoting Damn at the time, so he had to, put Damn up there. But yeah, I was like, you got to feel like this is your best work. I don't know. You were there,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, nah, I feel you, man. It's the, the things that he does on this album. You're right. He doesn't do it. He doesn't do it to this level. He does other things because
Yeah.
there's some things that he does great on Damn, but for my taste, for my personal taste, from a storytelling aspect, it doesn't get any better than To Pimp a Butterfly, man. Like it
Nah,
really does.
it's his next level. And even the spitting on here, man, where it's like,
Yeah,
money government in my Chevy, tell them all to come and get me, reaping everything I sold. So my karma coming heavy, no preliminary hearings on my record. I'm the motherfucking gangster. Solace for the record, huh? So it's not like he's letting up with the rapping. He's doing his thing rap
right.
wise on here. And
Yeah,
musically they're matching him, as far, and again, this sounds like a Neptune record, but it doesn't, man. Like if we talk about what's a Pharrell produced record, not a Neptune record. We talk about Pharrell and Neptune's production catalog. I doubt people would even mention this song, and this song is extremely important. That just shows you
right.
how big the influence of what Kendrick and his team were able to do with this record is. They made it fit within the scheme where it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb,
Yeah,
For sale.
yeah.
Um,
So
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, we also got to shout out. His name is Taz Arnold. He did a
Mm-hmm.
lot of production on this album. He did this, and he did You. He did Mama. He did a few joints.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I think this song is brilliant. I think it's brilliant. I'm a fan of juxtaposition.
Mm-hmm.
The same way that I love the hook, life's a bitch and then you die. That's why we get high, because you never know where you're gonna go. Over a
Mm-hmm.
Gap Band, over this happy Gap Band sample. Pardon me. Um, I'm just a fan, or like Three Stacks Hey Ya, where
Mm-hmm.
it sounds happy, but if you listen to the lyrics, he's actually like saying some real shit. Um, to me, this is what For Sale does for me, where obviously this is Lucy rapping. This is the character Lucy,
Mm-hmm.
and Lucifer. The idea of Lucy talking over this sort of dreamy kind of backdrop of a song is sort of it actually kind of reminds me of like like the Wizard of Oz, where they go through the poppy field. They go through the poppy field and they pass out and all that. It's sort of puts you in this dream world that's meant to seduce you. And of course that's what the devil does. And so I found that to be a good way. I like that approach to that. And of course, this is another one of those songs that incorporate the background vocals, but really just as texture, really just as additional instruments. It's in that set, just underscoring.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I agree. It's just amazing how these things continue to, weave into one another. It puts you in the mind of one of the other things that I thought about when with this Lucy character. It's very Damien DMX esque,
Mm.
where you're always hearing about, because I feel like Damien is that same symbolism, right? We talk
I keep
about
saying we gotta do that album too, bro.
we got to do that one for sure. No, we got to do that one because that, again, I think that album from a production standpoint is similar to this one, right? DMX is a producer on that album. Like what he's able to do and able to convey has everything to do with how, that production backdrop sets there. And this
Yeah,
message, and he's really trying to convey to you, who this Lucy character is. And,
yeah,
I wish too that we would have seen those things visually come to light
right,
or come to life while this album was being released. I think that those could have been powerful moments, if we were able to get him to kind of bring these notions to life. Because I don't think many people are aware of, where this album goes with that, or maybe don't care. But if
right,
you could, make people aware of how these things transpire and how these reoccurring themes continue to, peek their head through different songs. For sale with a question mark. It's like, is he for sale? Did he take the deal? Like we talk about
right.
industry plants all the time, right? And
Mm.
I was
Talk
talking
about
about, you were talking about this the other day, and it's like, okay, well, what exactly is an industry plant? You would have to come in with some sort of agenda or mission. And if that person is that, it's like, okay, well, what were they here to spread? And is every artist that's signed to a major label a plant or potential plant? I don't know.
right, right,
Um, but he's kind of letting people know, like, look, you know, am I above that? I don't know. Question mark. You judge for yourself, and these are all intermingling with the conflicted nature. Did he? Where is he at in the poem at this point of the?
I just had a sorry. I just actually had a
Go
I
ahead.
had a, sort of a revelation um, for free and for sale,
Mm-hmm.
and how they play because he says he's not for free. His he's not for free, and so does that mean you're for sale? I mean, I think that's it.
Yeah.
So if you're not for free, are you for sale?
What's your price?
Right. Wow. I just discovered like what hearing you say that made me think of that. That's crazy. Yeah.
Then it goes to mama.
Yeah.
And
Oh
this is
yeah.
that journey back home you were talking about.
Yeah. So sorry to answer your question with the poem. So we're at I remember you was conflicted, misusing your influence. Sometimes I did the same, abusing my power full of resentment. Resentment turned into a deep depression. Found myself screaming in a hotel room. I
Hmm.
didn't want to deconstruct. The evils of Lucy was all around me. So I went running for answers until I came home.
Okay, that's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
It's deep stuff, man. All right. And then we got mama, right? This is where he comes home. This is the journey home. Self
Ah,
awareness, humility. I always like to liken these types of narratives and notions to, was it Rocky 3? You know,
mm,
when Rocky was, successful, and Apollo was like, look, man, you got to take it back to the streets, and he had to take him to the gyms that he used to fight in to get his hunger back. I can imagine for an artist, once you're so busy and you make it to that quote unquote mountaintop, and it seems very fast, to get that hunger or keep that hunger, it's a challenge.
yeah.
And to get that hunger back, you got to go back home. I know I get a feeling even when I go back to the place where I grew up. It just feels different. You remember, you know, what you dreamed of, and when you dream those things, and it brings that feeling back. Because a lot of times you can't see the forest from the trees. When you're in it, you're in it, and sometimes you got to just take that dial back. And for him to have that level of self awareness, I do think it comes from I think it comes from experience. But Kendrick's a very, very smart guy. He always has been wise beyond his years. And the fact that he's able to put these things out there for us to consume and travel this journey with him, I think is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a Layla
Um,
Hathaway sample, by the way, since we're talking
it
from
is. It
that.
is. Well, and he actually, it was sampled by the guy's name was Knowledge.
hmm
So I guess Knowledge sampled it. It seemed like his own song called Sort,
Okay.
SO and then RT in parentheses. But he sampled it from Layla Hathaway, who also,
Okay.
and Layla Hathaway also lends vocals to other songs on this album, by the way.
Okay.
Um, um, the thing that stuck out to me, by the way, this is one of my favorite songs on this album.
Okay.
Like this is one of those that if it comes on, I'm listening to it, full. Like it feels like home. It feels like a home cooked meal almost. It's warm, it's pleasant, it's just all the things.
It says we've been
Um,
waiting for you.
yeah, yeah, and I was waiting for this track. As a listener, this is what I was waiting on. And I didn't know that Terrence Martin is singing on the vocoder
Mm.
in the background vocals. I was listening to it, and like it's subtle, but he uses the Roger Troutman vocoder, just ad lib on top of Layla Hathaway's vocals, which I thought was cool. I
That's
thought it
really
was
dope.
cool. Yeah, I thought it was dope to put that Thundercat bass. That bass is stupid, man. That deep electric bass is dope. Bilal has background vocals on this. Um, yeah, man. This is produced by Taz Arnold, but it incorporates that Layla Hathaway sample.
And while he's home, we got hood politics, man.
Yeah,
And to me, for the people who aren't really fond of where this album takes them and goes, this is the one that I feel like it's probably the most palatable song on the album, with the exception of All Right, of course. This
sure.
is where he's on his rap shit, and he say he got you on some weirdo, shit or whatever, and
Right.
he lets you know that K Dot and Kendrick Lamar is still there. I've been A1 since day one. You niggas boo boo. Like, he is killing this record. I mean,
Yeah,
for me, as a person who really appreciates the spitting and all that, this is always my go-to when I don't want to listen to the full album and I just
yeah,
want to listen to one song or whatever. I'm going to
yeah,
the record.
yeah. I remember he spit these verses on a radio, and as like freestyles, and it was like, oh, okay, he still got it. Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
like from Congress to Compton, set tripping all around like that. That got down on that shit, man.
Yeah, man, the red and blue, and it's like, yo, man, we were sitting down with Jay. The what was it?
It's crazy how
Funny
one
how
fuck
one
one
verse could
verse
fuck up the
can fuck
game.
up the
Shit,
game.
like it's yeah, man. He's killing this shit, man. Like,
Yeah,
again, I hate the comparisons and all that, and we always talk about these things, but that's why songs like this to me are the reason why I've always had Kendrick as number one in his class. Like, it's just
yeah,
when he does these things, he's very tough to compete with. When Drake came at him, I knew that the way to beat Drake was to do this, was to
yeah.
rap. Out rap him. You gotta out
Just out
rap him
rap them.
because when he
Yeah,
raps like this, Cole, Drake, none of those guys can see him, man. I know people probably disagree with me when it comes to Cole, but now when he raps like hood politics, Kendrick, those guys ain't seen him, and that's
Yeah,
just what it is, man.
yeah,
One of
facts.
my favorite songs on the album. I'm impressed in how on a cohesive album like this he was able to make this song fit and make it make sense. And
Right.
it does make sense when you go back home and you're searching for that hunger, and
Hmm.
it's part of that play. This whole album could be on stage, man.
It can.
Whole
It
album
really
could be
can.
like, as we're talking about this, I'm seeing different acts. Like this whole album could be on stage, even if they did it for a 10th anniversary and put this shit on stage now, it would go. It
Yeah,
would.
yeah,
It's incredible, man. And the next song is for many people one of Kendrick's best songs. I feel like we keep saying this, but
yeah,
How Much a Dollar Costs is often viewed as one of Kendrick Lamar's greatest songs.
yeah, yeah. I remember
Um,
they Obama put this on his playlist, didn't
yep.
he? Yeah,
Well, it speaks to a few things. It speaks to greed. It speaks to mortality. It speaks to, just doing good deeds to do good deeds. You don't know who you're talking to and who may be on the other end. I felt it was very interesting that Ronald Isley is on this record. Um,
yeah,
it means so much. It's again, this is where Kendrick separates himself from his peers, and I realized this in 2015, and I'm sure many people who listen to Section 80 realized it from jump. But it's one thing to do that early on, but it's another thing to do that after you've had, the biggest success of your career and one of the biggest albums of that time period, to show that you can still go there and you can still be incredibly conceptual and as compelling as you once were when you got discovered. Again, this speaks back to the hunger. You know what I mean? Like,
mhm,
I feel
mhm.
like, and we said this offline, the back end of this album is crazy. And the back end starts when he goes back home. And the symbolism of this is where the hunger comes from. And once he gets to Mama, this album really takes flight. Like this
Yeah,
album. I mean, it's already great stuff. Like, but once he gets there and the hood politics and to how much a dollar costs, like this shit takes flight, man.
yeah, yeah. This actually, how much a dollar costs actually reminds me of Section 80. Just the
Yeah, I
way,
was thinking that too.
yeah, yeah. And I love the drums on this, like the very Dre
Yep,
kind of drums, just the 1 2 and the like the fat reverb
yep.
snare. Um, yeah, man. I this is one of my favorite songs on the album, and there's one thing that you can't take away from Kendrick, and it's his ability to tell a story. And this is, like
Even the
he's
song title, man, before you even know where this song's going, like the
right.
song title, "How Much a Dollar Costs," like it's costing you your whole soul, and
Hmm.
it's it's great songwriting. I mean, straight up, like we, I think sometimes, man, there is an era bias for people who came up in more of a lyric heavy era. We got to think, man, how many people have really put together a song this compelling with a title like this? It's a select few.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
select few, and keeps doing it too.
Hmm.
Yeah, man, I'm sorry, I cut you off, man. What were you
Nah,
saying
man.
about?
Nah, man. You hit it. I think about this album, and it's like a play. It's like a book, and he didn't even. And this is gonna sound corny, but fuck it. Like he didn't put his. He separated himself from rappers to me in this album. To me,
Yeah,
like this is some like goddamn Harlem Renaissance, like Zora Neale Hurston type. You know what I'm saying? Like this is like on
yeah,
that level. Like this is great. literature that touches on, like, you can break down like the themes and, the content and all of that. Like,
It
yeah,
kind of goes
it's
back to what we were saying on the College Dropout episode, where people just wanted beats from Kanye, but
mhm.
he showed on this album that he had production to offer, and this is what Kendrick is in relation to the rest of his peers. No disrespect, but they're not putting this kind of thought into their records. It's just, I mean, it's just the truth. Like, if somebody else was putting this level of thought into weaving these stories together on an album and conceptual songs like this, let me know. Like, a 2015 class. I mean, it's got to be
Yeah.
honest about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the only other rapper I can think of, and he's not in that class, is Lupe.
Of course. Of course. Yeah.
Like, that's it.
And him and Lupe get compared a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Complexion.
Whew. Whew.
Okay, so we go from how much a dollar costs to colorism, basically. Um, I think the complexion is, like you said, the production on how much a dollar costs is very Dr. Dre esque, and with the heavy drum and snare and pattern, it's very recognizable. I do think it's a great sonic transition. And again, these are themes that you deal with back home. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are things that may not have been addressed by industry Kendrick, or that Lucy would have co-signed. Let me go back real quick. So after For Sale, question mark, he goes back home.
Right.
So did he just? Guess he wasn't for sale, right?
Until I came home, but that didn't stop survivor's guilt. Going back and forth trying to convince myself the stripes I earned were maybe how A1 my foundation was. But while my loved ones was fighting a continuous war back in the city, I was entering a new one. A war that was based on apartheid and discrimination. Made me want to go back to the city and tell the homies what I learned.
Mm,
Yeah, and I think that's where it stops. I
okay,
think that's
this is
yeah,
where he's at. Um, and Complexion is extremely palatable. I hate that this wasn't released as a single as well. It's a dope record.
yeah,
For a lot of people, this was the first time that they heard Rhapsody. I feel like this feature really took Rhapsody's career to the next level.
yeah,
Pete Rock's on here. Shout out to Pete.
yeah,
It's just a host of talented individuals giving an incredible message. And, Chocolate Boy Wonder had to be on a record called Complexion. And, same thing with Rhapsody or whatever, representing, that side of things and the colorism in our community that is spoken about. Um, I think it's just a beautiful record. I think, again, in this collage of jazzy, funky mixes. This is one of those, like you said, more simpler, you know, um, beats and rhymes type of records that kind of help put the glue together for an album that is this conceptual and this out there, if you will.
yeah, yeah. Um, Soundwave on the production, Thundercat on the production, Robert Glasper on the keys. Thundercat contributes background vocals on this. Again, just
Mm.
texture. It's such a great, it. I love how all hands on deck this project is, and everybody is just contributing a little bit of everything, and it's not people fighting to stand out or be in the front, like people contributing just something as simple background vocals just because it enhances the record that much. And
And it's
this
very
is
clear who the center of the universe is on this project, even with all of these
yeah,
hands on deck. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Well, I don't think it's any mistake that it goes from Complexion to Black of the Berry. I kind of liken this to, Black Star's definition and redefinition. It's almost like
yeah,
the other side of it. It's kind of like that part two of the You song,
mhm,
beginning of this
yeah,
album, where it's like, okay, well, This is a beautiful side of it, the Zulu love, and then you got Black of the Berry,
Mm,
where it deals with self hatred, violence in our community, and you know, wanting to take out others that look like you. And
right.
I remember this being the first song that I heard from this album. I was in it was in Fort Lauderdale. Yeah, I had a little thing down there or whatnot. And yeah, I was riding around and satellite radio. I think she was playing satellite radio, and this song came on, and I was like, he's about to make one of the best projects of his career. I just heard it. Like, I was like, yo, he's going in. And
Yeah,
generational hatred, it's just the way he was rhyming, the approach. It's
yeah,
that energy that you feel like when somebody's in a zone. Like, I remember when Common and Kanye went out there at the Chappelle show and did the food, and I knew something special was about to happen. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's
yeah,
just those moments that you feel. And I remember hearing this one first and being like, "Yo, this is different than the Good Kid, Mad City stuff," which was great stuff as well. I felt like he was better. I felt that he was even more comfortable, and the beat was just crazy hard. I think Boy Wonder did this, right?
yep,
Okay.
yep. I love the juxtaposition of complexion and Black of the Berry, even with what Kendrick does with his voice.
Yeah.
And it's how you described it. Complexion is sort of this, sweet, like softer sort of way about it, and then he goes straight grimy from the drums to the delivery. It just everything about this is gritty in a way that, like, if you I don't know who doesn't like this song, like on some hip hop shit. Like, this is the hardest joint.
And for
Like,
Kendrick to tell you, I'm the biggest hypocrite in 2015, I mean, you just
yeah,
never know if he's talking about himself. Well, I mean, you can just take it for what it is, right? He's talking about himself,
yeah,
or he's just talking about the greater problem. And I know one of my
right.
things with Kendrick, people who watch the show, watch the channel, is the fact that Kendrick doesn't explain his art anymore. I feel like on this project, he not only put out things for consumption, but you actually got some level of explanation from him. And and it shows how powerful it can be when he actually, rounds all of those things out. I mean, doing the research and talking about this album, I feel like, and I've heard, Punch say things like, y'all don't deserve a new Kendrick album. I feel like after this album wasn't received in the way that he probably thought it should have been and that I think it should have been, he probably was done with explaining shit to people.
Shit. Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
I can
because
see that.
he spelled out everything here. Everything. And people
Literally.
didn't get it or didn't
Yeah.
care.
Didn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the
So
that's the thing about him. I think that, there's this fine line of people being preached to, that, or at least feel like they're being preached to. I don't feel like the album is preachy. I think he does a great job of sort of finding that balance. But I just think that the threshold for substance just gets sort of smaller and smaller as the generations progress. Whereas it seems like, at least the rap music that I remember growing up on, there was a balance there. There was yeah, every generation has its, ignorant and it's ratchet, and for 90s music, that's, you could say that about like coke rap and all of that, and street rap, whatever. But there was always something you could also get Tribe, you could also get Black Star a little later, you could also get Outkast and all of that. And I think that, the thing that people struggle with Kendrick is, you know, he be talking about too much stuff. He be, and it's too much. It's too much going on into the concept, and
Yeah.
I gotta think.
It's
I gotta think too
overload.
much.
It's overload.
Yeah, and that used to be, but to me, I feel like that used to be the norm, and it used to be accepted, and it used to be what, at least for me, I used to love to go back and find new things about the album. I used to love to discover something new, and oh man, I missed it. It's like a good movie where every
It
time you go back
is.
to it, it's like, oh, I didn't catch that before. Oh man, and
Exactly. It's great writing. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
and writing not even just in the sense of a script or, editing, all of those things like editing, acting, performance. And when we talk about great writing and things like you're saying, always discovering things, that goes from the bars, that goes from the delivery, that goes to the references, that goes to the
mhm,
instrumentation, that goes to the production. I didn't hear that snare. I didn't know that snare came from here. I didn't know that this
yeah,
concept came from here. That all is great writing. And like you said, giving you something to continuously come back to. And I don't know where music or hip hop specifically, because I feel like hip hop complains about this more than anything, where we've gotten to where people just want the meat and potatoes of something, and things
right,
that have to deal with so many layers are viewed upon as you're doing too much.
yeah,
I think that's interesting because the next song is You Ain't Got a Lot. Um, I don't really see where this song fits in. And I love this song. I think the song is just really good and had to be on the album. I feel
yes,
like if we're talking about a song that could cohesively be taken out of the whole scenario,
I agree.
this is the one. But this is personally one of my favorites. I view this as a song like it's kind of like a family business for a college dropout.
Hmm.
You're it's just a really good song that you feel like has to be there. Like Strange Relationship from Prince on Sign of the Times. Like these are great songs that, they're not carrying the big load, but they add something to the album just because they're very dope. Now, I didn't realize that this was kind of an ode to Tupac as well, because he got a song that's very similar in that
Yes.
way, as far as like you ain't got a lot to kick it. Um, but I think that it's apropos that we were just talking about, how the complexities and the notion of this is you ain't got to try so hard.
Right.
And I don't know if that is the narrative that kept this song in the loop. But
So if
it's
I'm
just a dope record.
Yeah, I was gonna say if I'm thinking about this in the story, I think it serves as a great precursor to I, because before you can accept that you love yourself, you know, it's first being comfortable, figuring out how to be comfortable in your own skin,
True.
and not feeling like you have to put on a facade or put on a face for anyone else. You can exist authentically as who you are, and with that self acceptance, then comes the self love, which
Right.
is to me the journey of this whole thing. Of this whole album, where obviously love you is complicated, you know, all of that, and we finally get to a place where right before we can accept that I love myself, you have to first say, you know what, you have to first be okay with being you. You have to
Mm.
first be okay with who you are, and good and bad,
Yeah.
and it's you got it's what's that phrase, like you can't love me at my oh, you can't take me at my best if you can't love me at my worst, type shit.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what this speaks to.
You're right. This does set up I in that way, and I guess I wasn't thinking about it in those terms because I'm so caught up in the sonics of I and how those things changed from the original version. But you're right. I love myself is the message for the next record, but the foundation of that is to not have to lie to kick it. You ain't got to try so hard. When the
Yeah.
world don't accept you and you think it's all done. Yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
dope, man. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just so intentional, man. Like it's just so intentional. These puzzle pieces, the way they come together, and then you got I. Now I mentioned the Chappelle Show with Common and Kanye performing the food. I think it was very smart of them to include that version on B as opposed to the recorded version. I've heard both. I feel like the one that's on Chappelle is better. It's a different energy the live one gives you. Now,
Absolutely.
we spoke earlier about how I was released first, and I remember when I was released to radio. Well, at least I heard Rosenberg's commentary on it. They were trying to compare this song to Rosa Parks. Now, from Outkast. There were a lot of people who, after Good Kid, Mad City, it's like, this song kind of fell flat. And it didn't fly in the way that many people thought it would. And they kind of just moved on to King Kunta, really. And when the album got released, I thought it was just an incredible forethought or just notion to have the live version on there. The live version is much better than the recorded version. I thought they were just going to leave the song off the album altogether. And I'm glad they
Right.
didn't, because
Right.
I think that there's a lot of things that you catch in this live version, and not to mention the speech after it. We're going to get to that makes so much sense with this album, and it gives you that live funk. It gives you that live vibe, and you just feel everything that's going on in there. He's so clear. I don't think
Yeah.
Kendrick Lamar gets, well, he gets it now. Back then, I don't think Kendrick Lamar got enough credit for how great of a performer he is, his breath control and his clarity.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
really, if we're talking about somebody who might need a live album, I think he's one of those guys.
Absolutely.
A live album.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
he's able to convey some things from live performance lyrically that you catch even clearer in his performance than you would in the actual recorded version. And
Yeah.
this song is one of those examples. I mean, the fact that they put this on the album, to me, if we're rating this, five mic era source and all that, that move in conjunction with everything else really solidifies the five mic classic for me on this album.
Yeah. Um, I would also like to say, just in terms of the story, and where we are in the story.
Hmm.
So in every great story, in a lot of movies and a lot of plays incorporate the same sort of story structure. Without getting too dense with it, we've we've sort of taken this journey. It was sort of this journey of self. Um, you know, I don't know if people have read Hero's Journey. The Now I'm forgetting the name of the Joseph Campbell. Actually, crazy enough. So I don't know if people have ever read
Because
his
I got
book.
it right here.
Yeah. So because a lot of movies incorporate um, this his way of telling stories. A lot of classic movies. We mentioned Lion King, Star Wars. Like they incorporate that style of storytelling, and I bring that up because um, there's certain steps along the journey that happens, and there's the oh man, my man J. Kyle would kill me right now because I'm like forgetting it's not coming to me right now. But basically, you have like you call you have to answer the call, you refuse the call. There's a point in the story where there's no turning back. There's a point of no return. You reach a moment where you've hit your rock bottom, and then there's
Mm.
a moment in the story where you're put to the test. You've come a long way in your journey, and there's things that you are supposed to learn, and now you have to apply what you've learned in this final test, right? And so this is, to me, this is where we are with I, where this is his test, everything that we've learned. So
Mm.
this is a story about self-love, and not only literally loving yourself, but also loving yourself as in loving your people. And to me, it's so brilliant that in this song called I Love Myself, black on black violence is about to ensue. And now he has to incorporate everything that he has learned up in this point to diffuse this potential killing, this potential violence
Mm-hmm.
from breaking out. He uses everything that he's learned that we've been on this journey with, and he uses this. He's learned all of this for this moment. If he can just
Mm.
stop this one moment from happening, if he can stop this one incident of violence from happening, then everything that he's gone through up to this point is not in vain. And to me, this is what this moment is about. And and I and to me that's
That's
the
brilliant.
brilliant. And it's one of those. This is the thing too, is that I didn't like this song when it first came out. I don't like the studio recording of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's one of those that I didn't appreciate the studio version of it until after. And you have to. It's one of those songs that you have to hear it in context in order to appreciate it. And I think like I didn't understand it as a single. I really didn't. And it wasn't until listening to it on the album, and it helps that it's live. It helps that
Mm-hmm.
he's rapping in his normal voice. It's helpful that you got the female background vocals that lended a different kind of energy. It helps
Right.
that he's rapping with more energy just because it is live. It helps that he's backed by a live band, which you can't beat live music. There's just all of these elements that go into this live version that make it much more palatable to listen to. But from a story standpoint, like it, this is such a great exclamation point at the end and a culmination of everything that we've worked up to. This album that's about self love. You have to. It's an affirmation that we as people we need to be able to say that out loud. You need to be able to say, I love myself. There's power in saying, yes, I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. And if there's a gift that he could have given us, it is that. If we as black people, and I'll get off my soapbox in a minute, but
No,
if
go for it.
we as black people are reciting lyrics and repeating lyrics of rappers, and we talking about doing Molly, we talking about shooting each other. If there's any lyrics that we should be reciting and repeating and saying out loud, because there is power in the tongue, there is
Mm.
there is power in the tongue, it should be positive affirmation, something as simple as I love myself.
I agree. Now, I mean, it's a whole lot, and there's a whole lot you explored there. And you're right. This is the song. I mean, the album honestly could have ended here. You know what I mean? It caps
Yeah.
off this whole notion, and I'm glad it didn't end here because Mortal Man is incredible to end with as well. But just where he's going here, and I want to go to this last verse before, like you said, the whole conflict ensues because it is very. It's great that you pointed out that yes, this right here is the test. So now I'm going out into the world, live performance. I'm saying this. I'm giving this message to the people, and there's still conflict. And now I'm being tested to that degree. But this is the verse that happens before those things happen. I went to war last night with an automatic weapon. Don't nobody call a medic. I'm gonna do it till I get it right. I went to war
Mm,
last night. I've been dealing with depression ever since adolescence, ducking all the other blessings. I can never see the message. I can never take the lead. I can never bob and weave. And the negative and letting them annihilate me. And it's
mm.
inevitable to move at a meteor speed. Finna run into the building, lay my body, and then it stopped. And it's crazy. Like, I didn't look. I didn't get the intensity of where he was going on this on the, like you said, on the recorded version, but on the live version, all of this comes through so clear. And then he's like, "Yo, stop it!" And then you know what I'm saying. That's when he goes into his soapbox, if you will. And these are things that we never really hear Kendrick do. We never hear Kendrick talk to the people and speak to the people almost as like that leader that everybody, I don't want to say builds him up to be. It sounds, facetious. I don't mean it in that way, but he's actually speaking to the people without the rhyme, speaking to people in a way that Tupac would, or a civil rights leader would. And he has that in him. And he showed us that on this stage, on this album. We don't get that much from him anymore because, again, I mean, I can't knock him. He gave it to us at some point, and he
Right.
explained where his perspective was at that point, and his issue with, like you said, self-love, and that was all about self-love. Everything that he said in that diatribe was about self-love after the conflict ensued. Like you said, he was being tested, and this was the moment. And not only was he showing the moment through song, but he also did it through speech too. It's perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
um Again, man, like, it's easily his best album. I mean, like, and then we talking about all of these things, man. I love My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and I think people love My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy for more technical reasons. But I think this just does more.
Yeah. I agree.
It just does more. And then it goes into Mortal Man. Mortal
This is my
Man.
favorite song.
It's your favorite song on the album? It's a great
Yeah.
one. The whole concept of Mortal Man is, again, it's about not just self love at this point. Now it's about how much do you love me, and are you going to give me the opportunity to let you down, and how hard are you going to come down on me as a fan if I do let you down? It makes me think about, I don't want to bring Puffy into the conversation, but it's like, I feel like all these things that are being spewed about Puffy in the media and all of that, who knows? They could be true, they could not be true. But I feel like somebody like Puff has been a part of our lives from an entertainment standpoint, and a part of so many other successes that, outside of the Cassie video, I do feel like we owe him the, due process that everyone else is allotted. Like, can people chill until, we actually get all the facts on the table and um actually get this trial going? This song feels like to me the court of public opinion.
Yeah.
When shit hits the
Yeah.
fan, are you still a fan? And I don't think that means like you just stick up for me whatever I do. But if people are coming at me with just whatever, are you really going to look into this? Or is this going to be a situation where you hear allegations and like, oh, yeah, I knew that nigga wasn't shit. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
we saw that with Jay-Z, man. Like, when people, this false allegation came out there, and that person's dealing with that now. But there were people who were like, I knew it. I told you Jay-Z was next. Blah, blah, blah. It's like you were waiting for the moment. And that's the crazy thing about fandom too. It's like you have starch supporters, you have people that are gonna ride with you and never met you at all. But you also have a large majority of people who are waiting for anything, whether it is whether it's true or not, or whether it has any validity or not. They're waiting for the moment to say, "I knew he wasn't what I thought he was."
Right.
And Immortal Man's the perfect title for this. Like, listen, I'm human just like everybody else. I'm not going to be
Right.
perfect. I'm not going to do everything right. But are you going to be the first person to cast these stones, or are you going to wait for, everything to be materialized? And even if it is something that is forgivable, are you going to be able to forgive me based on the pedestal that I've been put on?
Yeah. It
Yeah.
makes me think of every nigger is a star, and I'd say
Yep.
that with an ER. I do say that with an ER. In that this is the conversation that he's bringing to the table is this is what we do to black celebrities, black male celebrities. We there's not one black male celebrity, and I'm surprised. I'm surprised Denzel done made it this far, honestly. But
Denzel
it can,
stays out the way. Seems like he
yeah,
handles his profession like a job, does his work, and goes home.
yeah, and as a black male celebrity in particular, it seems like it's more than likely this character assassination will happen to you than not. And I'm almost wondering if this is foreshadow. I'm almost wondering if he's predicting this to happen for himself. Um, you know, when, because it it would happen. You know what I mean? Like it's just inevitable. It is the thing that it is constant. And as this relates to, if we're relating this back to the story, it's like, what is it all for? He went through, he's going through all of this stuff, and he's getting a taste of fame. We start with the fame, and he's getting a taste of fame, and this is everything that fame has brought him, only to end here. So is it worth it?
Yeah.
What I mean? It's like we do all of this, and I still can't ride off into the sunset. I still can't, I this still can't have a happy ending. What's the point?
I mean, he does say when shit hits the fan, not if,
Mm-hmm.
and I do believe that, like we said, we talk about sophomore efforts, and I know technically this is his third album, or maybe it could be fourth, depending on,
Right,
how long
right,
you've been listening to Kendrick, who knows? But
right,
we're talking about efforts right after that big break, right? And I think for more traditional terms, this would be considered a sophomore effort based on how Good Kid, Mad City was positioned as a debut. Now, with that being said, most sophomore efforts are talking about life after the fame, whether the good things, the bad things, or whatever. This one is almost a study in what happens to most people after the fame.
right.
And also self-reflection there, and it's a mix of his personal experience and journey and struggle with it, and others struggle and journey with it. And that's what we normally don't get in sophomore efforts. We don't normally get, you know basically other people's ups and downs throughout their journey of fandom and just full out career, not just sophomore effort. Because the way it's normally positioned is, I don't want to say it's a surprise, but it's almost like a reaction as opposed to a study. This was more so a study on how black entertainers' careers go, period,
Yeah, yeah,
from top to bottom, not just
yeah,
first, second, third, or whatever. And this caps it all off. And this now is, like you said, this is a question for the fans, because ultimately the fans are the ones that hold the cards in these situations. I mean, I always said, man, if it wasn't for the fans, Nas would be out of here. If it wasn't for the fans, Chris Brown would be out of here. And the
mhm,
fans keep their artists around. And I think it's just brilliant that he caps this album off with "I" and then "Mortal Man," and it's just great stuff, man. I
yeah.
mean, I don't know what else to say, man. It's
Well,
very layered.
and then on then to really cap it off, he has a whole interview with Tupac. Like,
Well, he finishes his poem, and we
yeah,
never know that Tupac is at the end of this. So I guess quote the whole um, piece that was coming together throughout this whole effort, and I guess how that relates to his interview with Tupac.
I remember you was conflicted, misusing your influence. Sometimes I did the same, abusing my power full of resentment that turned into a deep depression, found myself screaming in the hotel room. I didn't want to Pardon me, I didn't want to self destruct. The evils of Lucy was all around me, so I went running for answers until I came home, but that didn't stop survival guilt. Going back and forth trying to convince myself the stripes I earned or maybe how A1 my foundation was. But while my loved ones was fighting a continuous war back in the city, I was entering a new one, a war that was based on apartheid and discrimination. Made me want to get back to the city and tell my homies what I learned. The word was respect. Just because you wore a different gang color than mine doesn't mean I can't respect you as a black man. Forgetting all the pain and hurt we cause each other in these streets. If I respect you, we unify and we stop the enemy from killing us. But I
Mm.
don't know. I'm no mortal man. Maybe I'm just another nigga.
Hey, man, classic. And all of that comes together. I feel like, from a production standpoint and just an album making standpoint, everybody was in sync on this effort. And I feel like the framework for this album had to be put together. And I feel like he had to kind of say, yo, I'm going to make a song called This for This. I don't feel like
Mm-hmm.
this is a situation where you're recording a bunch of songs and then you're just placing them. I'll put it that way.
No, not
Every
at all.
song is intentional.
Yes.
And when songs are intentional in that way, you have a greater chance to musically be able to wove them, together as well and make them consistent themes. Because again, one of the things you brought up on this show is the fact that you have these phrases that are said, throughout different songs that revert you back to a song previously on the album. And yeah, that wasn't done, you know, just by chance or by recording a bunch of songs. He knew what was going to be on this album and he worked on those records, him and his
Yeah.
team. And it's incredible stuff. I feel like he knew he was going to end it this way as well. I mean, the mind of Kendrick Lamar in that way is something that we just don't talk about enough. And that's what I took away from the halftime show as well, is the
Yeah.
fact that he put this show together in that way and with so many intents behind it. I know a lot of people, troll about, people just over analyzing a performance, but because of efforts like this from 10 years ago, this is why we look a little bit deeper beneath the surface from this individual whenever he does something, because the intent has always been there.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's
Mm-hmm.
he's always been intentional. And I would also add that a lot of times everybody's creative process is different, but a lot of times with composers that write musicals, they start with the song titles um, before they even get to the music. A lot of times it starts with the what's the song, what's the concept,
Mm-hmm.
and you build it from there because it's the narrative that informs the music and not the other way around, at least in storytelling. The story is always key. The story is always the thing that um, you know we chose this music based off of where we are in the story, and that's how it should always be. And so um, that's what I that's what I hear on this album. Um, the intention behind it, and how purposeful all of the songs were. I think it you can't tell me that putting this dreamy sort of sequence underneath for sale isn't on purpose with Lucy talking over it. You can't tell me that's not on purpose. You can't
Yeah.
tell me that Mama doesn't is not meant to make you feel like you at Mama's house, that you at home, that you know that it has this warm feeling. You can't tell me that that's not on purpose. Everything is done for a reason.
That's the thing, man. Like when you when you set up these themes and the way that you set them up, you have to set the scene. And when it comes to music, the backdrop is the musicality, the musicianship, the production, and the production has to match those messages. And they knocked that out the park on all of this, man.
Yeah.
Straight up classic, man. And it's celebrating 10 years. And listening to it over the past few days, like I said, I can't put a number on this album. I couldn't tell you what year it dropped. It's just great stuff, and great concepts, and really, I feel like it's more relevant to the artist's life, Kendrick Lamar, that is, today than it was in 2015, which is incredible, and it's allowed this album to age even more. And I know there are some times when many of the publications, because Kendrick is relevant and current, they they overrate some of the things that he does. Mainly the diss record. I remember they put, Euphoria, Over the Bridge Is Over, and then only been out a week. That stuff happens. But
Right.
when it comes to this album, I know this is one of the greatest hip hop albums I've ever heard. So, and I'm not just saying that to be cool or to sound whatever or try to,
Right.
parlay
Right.
to a
Right.
certain generation. Like, I mean, just breaking this thing down and putting it out there like that, like it's similar to Akumenai in this way. It may not have, the flagships that some of our greatest hip hop albums have as far as like singles, but if we're talking
Hmm.
about a cohesive piece that, reads incredibly from beginning to end, and the lyricism, the musicality, and the originality, it's very tough to beat. It's one of the best out there. Does it have a award tour on it? No, it doesn't. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. I want to clarify on that, because usually when you say
Yeah.
something is, one of the greatest ever, like, it ain't got, straight out of Compton on it. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But if we want to talk about an album that reads from beginning to end and has this level of intent and um, this sentiment, it's tough. It's tough to,
Yeah.
not have it in that conversation straight up. And then you have to ask yourself, why don't you view an album that has all of these things higher?
Right.
You know? I don't know.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But
One
yeah,
of the best produced albums I've ever heard, man.
straight up,
Top.
man. And yeah, man, this made me a solidified Kendrick fan. And similar to what you said earlier, I knew he was different from everybody in his era. And the comparisons for me stopped then, just straight up. Like,
Yeah.
no one's made anything even close.
No.
And
No.
right
Not at all.
then, the comparisons were over. And sometimes that happens, man. Like, shit. And for me, man, when I heard Andre on, I mean, listen, Andre on ATLians and stuff, yeah, I was like, it's dope. When I heard Andre on the Kumina, it's like, man, the comparisons for a lot of people stopped. It was like,
Yeah.
nah.
Yeah.
So,
That's when he became Andre 3000 on that
yeah.
album.
Yeah. And, it happens like that, man. Like, I think with Nas, too, when we heard Illmatic, it was like, oh, yeah, this guy's different.
Yeah.
And for me, like I said, Good Kid, Mad City was an incredible offering to the mainstream, and I think he delivered on everything he needed to. But not only following up something that's successful, but actually conceptually taking it to a whole nother place and musically taking it to a whole nother place, that said a lot about him as an artist. And lyrically,
Yeah.
he's better on this album than he is on Good Kid, Mad City to me, too. So,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah, he gets better. He becomes a better writer every album.
I think
And
so, too.
my
I can
and
give you
that's
that, too. Yeah.
yeah, and that's and I was trying to explain this to Ron, but he wasn't trying to hear this shit. But that's
Right.
the thing about the Mr. Morale album that I don't think people give it enough credit. I can't. I'm not gonna sit here and defend all of the songs. Like I get it. A lot of the songs are just not. I can understand why people just don't like the songs. But I'm just saying that as far as his pen goes, if you were to just read the lyrics on paper with no music, his pen game is stupid on the
His
record.
writing is crazy on Mr. Morale.
It's crazy on
And the
Mr.
thing
Morale.
is, he going through all of these things, he knows how to make palatable music. He understands that. And I feel like his journey from Good Kid, Mad City to this to Damn shows you that he knows how to make palatable music with his style. I think Damn is the album where he was able to master who he was and make stuff that was palatable for widespread audiences. I feel like after
Absolutely.
Damn, he just didn't care. It's like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna do what I want to do, and that's what Mr. Morale sounds like to me. Now, again,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sit there and make excuses for it. I just kind of got to judge what I hear. But like you
Right.
said, one thing that can't be questioned on Mr. Morale is the writing, and the writing is a consistent, and he's consistently become a better writer. Every time he comes out there. GNX, I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, for what
Yeah.
GNX is supposed to be, it is. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that he could, make a To Pimp a Butterfly tomorrow, but I do have faith that he could. You know what I mean? If he really wanted to, like, if that was where the
Absolutely.
journey was taking him,
Yeah.
I think he could do that.
Yeah,
But we've
man.
been on here 2 hours talking about this album. That's crazy. I think this is our longest episode yet. Yeah.
No
What an
doubt.
incredible piece. Hit like and subscribe. Happy 10th anniversary to Pimp a
Yes.
Butterfly. And
Yes.
yeah, man, King Kendrick, man, I feel like he earned it with this one. That's where the title comes from for me. So
Yes, sir.
I appreciate you, man. That was a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, man. And
Always
let us know
is.
which
Always
album
is.
y'all want us to do next too, man. We're debating what's next, I guess.
Yeah.
We haven't really solidified what's next, but should we dip into the 80s next, or I mean,
Yeah.
we done went 90s twice, 2000s, 2010s with this one.
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
mean,
Let us know in
unless
the
there's,
comment section.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll think about it offline, so we're not rushing into anything. All right, brother, man. Great talking to you,
All right,
man.
bro.
This was great. This is a classic. Yes, sir.
Always.